What is going on, folks? Will Turbot, aka the reincarnation of L. Ron Hubbard and heir to all of his mansions and cars. Fake Mike, real news. It's always awkward when you do that in front of cool guests that are esteemed people, but hey, that's the thing. That's what people resonate more with emotion than logics and fact. But today we're going to try to combat that. So, guys, please share the video. We're here with J. Michael Springman. He's a lawyer, he's an author, used to work for the US government in all sorts of capacities. And on screen, I want to point your attention to this, if I could briefly. And guys, if you're just joining, share the video. This is The Ugly American. Now, this is a documentary film about my life made in 1985. Just kidding. J. Michael Springman, could you tell the folks at home about this book and its influence not only on you, but on the world as a whole, especially in the United States?
Okay, well, I think I can speak best to its effect on me. I read it in high school, and that made me want to join the Foreign Service, the State Department's diplomacy. I saw that they had done a real job on the State Department and the kinds of idiots that they hired, and how they were not really in touch with reality. They weren't in touch with the host country. They were basically people that were time servers. And if I remember correctly from many years ago, it made quite a commotion when it came out. It pointed out the problems the American government faced abroad, and nobody did much about it, unfortunately. It really showed how difficult the American government was in managing its own foreign affairs. And I think that it's still worth reading. I think that it showed that the successful Foreign Service officer, the American diplomat, was someone who knew what was going on in the country, understood the people, understood the culture, and was able to bridge the gap between the United States and the host country, wherever it might be, Germany or Vietnam or India or any place in Nigeria, for example.
Yeah, unfortunately, it seems like it's this boys' club, and the thing I admire about you is that you were bold enough to say something about that. And what we see when we've interviewed whistleblowers or we watch it on the news is, for whatever reason, and I'd be curious to find out why. But you had it in you to say, hey, this is wrong. And I always say that heroes aren't people like Captain America. They're just regular people that make the right decision, even though it's a difficult decision. And anybody could be a hero doing these things in their life. I mean, maybe you could talk about what made you do that too. But it's pretty, and we can get. I really want to detail the story. I mean, I know you've been working for the government for a long time before that, and I have some questions about that too. But I'm very curious to see not only how you were treated, but what gave you the impetus to go ahead and blow the whistle.
Well, I think what gave me the impetus was basically I had sworn an oath to preserve and protect the Constitution of the United States and defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And with more than 22 years service with the federal government and the Commerce Department and the State Department, I've got to say the only enemies I've ever come across were domestic ones, people who worked for the United States of America.
And now this is something that I run into quite frequently because aside from doing interviews, we do a lot of basically journalism. I really don't want to call it journalism, but we've asked a lot of people questions that the mainstream media won't ask them questions. We were asking Biden and Clinton about their involvement with Epstein years before the news was talking about this. And it's pretty interesting to me to see how it's this big club, and you're one of the few people that was speaking out against this. We have, sorry, my connection's going here, guys. Pardon me. Yes. Okay. Sorry about that. But this is one of the things that we deal with when we're dealing with public servants. I've literally asked thousands of police officers over just the last few months, how seriously do you take your oath to the Constitution? And they say, oh, I take it so seriously. I'm a cop, of course. and then I'll throw a random amendment at them and ask them if they know what it is, and they don't. So what is it? Is it there are these people they don't know it? Do they not care? How come you are taking it more seriously? Because it seems like a lot of people they're taking an oath to something they didn't even read, and how does that even come about?
Well, the people that I dealt with at the State Department who made such trouble for me wanted me to violate the law, the Immigration and Nationality Act, and the State Department's Foreign Affairs Manual, which is essentially the Bible on how to do everything in the State Department, for everything from dealing with visas to working on ethics and issues on how to process paperwork. They basically wanted me to violate the law. And I said, no, my name is on the visa plate. I'm the one that goes to jail. I'm the one that gets fined, whatever. And the more questions I asked, the less information I got. My book, Visas for Al-Qaeda, CIA Handouts to Rock the World, started this and went from the beginning on to the end, extrapolating from my situation in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia.
Let's talk about that. Let's start with your time was it's 88 to around 91. Let's start there for people
Okay.
and break that down. Please take your time.
Sure. Well, I had been assigned to the American Consulate General at Jeddah as the officer in charge of the visa section. And before I left Washington, I began to hearing all kinds of strange stories about problems with the visa section. And I had been told by an experienced consular officer that when you hear problems, you best get to the bottom of it or it's your neck on the block. So I kept asking questions in Washington and nobody would tell me anything of substance. And in fact, I had an interview with the American ambassador at the time, Walter Cutler, who was in town for consultations with State Department officials and other parts of the government. And I expected it to be a simple hello and goodbye. I'm a new member of your official family. And went in and sat down with him. And for 45 minutes, he told me about all the problems my predecessor, Greta Holtz, had created for him and for the American embassy in Riyadh. And I said, well, what is this? He's telling me something, but I don't know what it is that he's telling me. And he talked about, these poor women, they couldn't come to the United States without their seamstresses and their dressmakers and their people who did hairdressing and things like this. And I thought, well, this is really bizarre. And afterwards, when I talked to the State Department official who was there with me in the meeting, I said, well, what was this? What was going on? And his reply was, well, I don't know. Cutler is just a queer duck. Well, what it was is he was telling me to get with the program and issue visas to people who were not qualified for them. The Immigration and Nationality Act and the Foreign Affairs Manual both say that the burden of proof that the visa applicant will go to the United States for a specific limited purpose and then return, and that he has compelling reasons to return. He can't give up his job. He can't give up his property. All his family is in the place of application or country of origin. He's going to the university and is almost ready to graduate, and he can't miss that. Well, what happened was I was being ordered to issue visas to people I had refused because they couldn't convince me that they had any particular ties that would compel them to return. And the Consul General in Jeddah at the time, J. Philip Freres, who fortunately is now dead, he insisted that I issue the visa and would never explain why. And this went on through the 18 months I was in Jeddah. It got to the point where people would tell me, you can issue the visa now, or you can refuse it and we'll go right to Freres and get it reversed, which of course was a violation of the Foreign Affairs Manual. You can't change a visa officer's decision unless you can come up with more information that he didn't have when he denied the visa. And of course, Freres, according to my predecessor, Greta Holtz, at one point was sitting on the visa line issuing visas himself. And I found his own visa plate there when I was leaving Jeddah. And of course, as consul general, he has no reason to sit and interview people for visas. So it turned out once I was out of the State Department, and I'd been fired with no reason given, that Joe Trento, the journalist, said, well, what they're doing is recruiting the Mujahideen for the war in Afghanistan against the then Soviet Union. And I said, the penny dropped. I understood
And
now.
when you say
That's
they,
why
I'm
we got
sorry
some.
to interrupt you, Mike, but when you say they, are we talking about the CIA here? Who are we speaking about?
Well, we're talking
State
about
Department.
the CIA. The State Department supposedly has Foreign Service officers assigned to all of its embassies and consulates. In actual fact, in places like Jeddah, the people from the CIA and the National Security Agency outnumber the real diplomats. When I was there, out of some
Oh my
20
goodness, that's just
Americans,
so crazy. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's
yeah,
something very unexpected. So
sure.
sorry.
Out of some 20 Americans, there are only maybe 3 people, including myself. Maybe it could go as high as 6 or that many that I knew for a certainty to have worked for the State Department. Freres had a peculiar background. Of course, you had a part-time consular officer, Andy Weber, who really worked for the Central Intelligence Agency. You had Eric Qualkenbush, the head of the CIA base, which is an office at a consulate. The equivalent at an embassy is called the station, that oversees all of the CIA officials in the country. We had a big National Security Agency staff there that essentially listened to everything going on in some 50-odd consulates in Jeddah, and also listening to what was happening in East Africa. And they had a CIA linguist there who spoke Arabic, and he worked out of the NSA operation there. So by and large, it was not a State Department post. And I've heard from real Foreign Service officers like Jay Hawley, who had been with me in India, that it's roughly a third of the people assigned to a Foreign Service post don't work for the State Department. They work for the various intelligence services. That was confirmed by a former CIA station chief to me. And there was a former ambassador who's now dead, who had worked, I think, the Center for National Security Studies. He said in many instances, it's more than half. And certainly I saw that in Jeddah. And when I was later assigned to the consulate in Stuttgart, 2 successive consuls general, Day Mount and Doug Jones, worked for the agency, or at least the NSA. It wasn't clear which, but they did not work for the State Department. And these are the people who are making and carrying out American foreign policy.
What do you think is the interest there? What are their interests?
Well, their interest basically was finding out what was going on in the country, and I'm not sure they were very good at doing that. As one example, I had had a European diplomat and a countryman come in, and we were going out to dinner, and had a few beers before we went out. And they were telling me about what they saw down at the Islamic port of Jeddah, that the Saudis had bought Chinese-made Silkworm intermediate-range ballistic missiles, and they were being shipped in containers and unloaded and all set to be shipped to other parts of the country. And the Saudis were moving things around to make sure that people didn't have good sight lines of these things as they were unloaded. And it wasn't the CIA that knew this. It wasn't the NSA that knew this. I knew it because I had good contacts that I had carefully cultivated. And I happened to tell the air attaché who was down that weekend, and I said, are you down here for the Saudi Silkworm missiles, or are you down here really to go scuba diving in the Red Sea? And the guy said, what? And I told him essentially what I've told you. And then he immediately called Riyadh to get either a flyover by a photo reconnaissance plane or from a satellite, overhead imagery, as they call it, to see what was going on. And then I had to fight with Freres and the consulate staff to get the message out. And of course, they want to know where I got it, how I got it. And I kept as much of it as tightly held as I possibly could because I wanted to not give up my contacts to who knows what or who knows where. So eventually they sent the cable, sent it to the embassy for approval, and then sent it to Washington, where it made the president's daily national security briefing.
Now, if you could go on and talk about, obviously you have your personal experience here too, but I'm guessing just being involved in what you do, and obviously it was such a huge event in our lives. I mean, what is your take on what really happened on 9/11?
Well, it's kind of hard to come up with any definitive answer because the government has an explanation of the week. And what you do is you tell so many stories and have so many possible explanations that nobody can pick anything out. I mean, you had people saying, well, these were specially modified airplanes, or there was some kind of radio control, or this, that, or the other thing. But in actual fact, 110-story buildings don't collapse into their own footprint. You had the third building, what was it, 50-odd stories in World Trade Center 7, that collapsed as well. And I've been to a couple of these conferences where they had engineers and architects saying this doesn't happen. You have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do something else. Jet fuel doesn't burn hot enough to melt the girders inside the building. World Trade Tower 7 was mostly concrete with a steel frame, and that was not hit by anything. Yet all of a sudden it collapsed again into its own footprint. So we need a complete investigation. We need to find out what's really going on. And they've had various attorney groups get together and try to get a New York to authorize the Attorney General, U.S. Attorney General for New York, to authorize a grand jury to investigate this. And so far they've run against a stone wall, of course, because the government doesn't want to explain what really happened and can't explain why such buildings go straight down all of a sudden when they're designed to be hit by airplanes. They had a 707 mock-up or model was the idea behind the two tall Trade Center buildings, and they were designed to withstand a hit by a 707.
Two 707, said the engineers on video.
Yeah. And, looking back in the past, the Empire State Building right after the war was hit by a B-25 medium bomber, and it was open for business the next day. So I think that the explanations given don't hold water. And the only way we're going to find out what really happened is to have an honest-to-God investigation, something a bit more substantial than the Commerce Department's. It's the Bureau of Standards, but they've changed its name to what is it? I can't remember what they're calling it now. But their explanation doesn't hold up. The New York City's explanation doesn't hold up. You name it, organizations' explanations don't hold up. So what we need to do is look at this and sweep away all the fairy tales and all of the explanations that don't match and find out what really happened. But what the government does is tell so many stories, you can't get at the truth. You can't decide what the truth is because there's bits and pieces of information floating around, and you just simply can't corral it and control it and put it together like a big jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I also agree with you. I'm not the type of person that, I definitely will speculate in my own mind, but I think it's more important that we have a proper investigation done. And I think it's less important to speculate on what potentially could have happened rather than focus on some of the questions and anomalies that already exist. And like you said, do our own investigation, an independent investigation. And, there are certain things that you can't deny. And then again, some of these agencies will come up again. And I'll kind of ask the same question again, like, what is the CIA's interest? Because it doesn't seem to be, the CIA is saying, hey, buddy, we need you to basically let these Al-Qaeda guys in right now. And we have stuff that Al-Qaeda couldn't have brought down Tower 7 unless they were working, that's my opinion, unless they were working somehow with with elements, FBI or CIA or any pick your alphabet agencies. And I also understand that there's a certain degree of rivalry and competition between those, from what I've been told. So, like, what is the interest of the CIA and these alphabet agencies? And are they the masters? Are they servants of somebody else? Because it doesn't seem like it's definitely not the Constitution. I think we can both agree on that.
Yeah. Well, it's basically the idea of the CIA has grown out of supposedly an intelligence gathering organization to make up for the supposed failures of the Pearl Harbor attack, which if you read enough books, like a fellow named Stinnett did a book called Day of Deceit, I guess maybe 20 years ago now, that I just finished. He pretty much lays out what Franklin Roosevelt did to ensure the Japanese would attack the United States. And the CIA supposedly grew out of not collecting enough information, supposedly, although from what Stinnett and other articles I've seen have said, that the government knew. But the idea with the agency is it's gone from an information collection organization to a group that essentially overthrows governments, engages in assassinations of politicians the United States doesn't like or the CIA doesn't like. There is a clause in it that says that the CIA may do things that the National Security Council and the president may order. It's a one sentence that really doesn't say much of anything, and they've seized on it so they can engage in clandestine activities all the way around the world. They started out with the overthrow of Mohammad Mossadegh in Iran in 1953. The following year, in 1954, they overthrew the government of Guatemala, Jacobo Arbenz, because they didn't like what he was doing, and he was asking questions about the United Fruit Company owning most of the country and controlling most of the country, and he wanted to ensure that the people of Guatemala got a fair shake. Same thing happened with Iran. Mossadegh had nationalized the what is now British Petroleum, BP, and I think at the time it had been the Anglo-American Oil Company. I'm a little fuzzy at the moment on that. But by and large, Mossadegh didn't do anything other than what the British Labour government did in the 1940s, where they nationalized the railroads, the coal mines, and so forth. But, oh my God, he's done this, and we have to do something about it. So the United States and Britain got together and managed to get him tossed out, and they installed the repressive and repulsive Shah, who tyrannized the country for the next 20 years or so, until he himself was overthrown by Khomeini. So what the agency does is look for ways to conduct its own foreign affairs and engage in assassinations. The book Murray's Mosaic by a guy named Janney, he wrote about how they arranged for the murder of Kennedy's mistress, and covered it up with the help of Ben Bradley from the Washington Post and James Jesus Angleton, the CIA's head of counterintelligence. So the whole thing is an absolute horror. I mean, you had the assassination of Lumumba in the Congo. You've got people dropping dead in various places around the world. You've got the disaster that became Afghanistan. You've got the overthrow of Saddam Hussein in Iraq. You've got the attempted overthrow of Bashar al-Assad in Syria. He still has a government, but the Americans are occupying the country. And according to Philip Giraldi, who was a former CIA official, and Vanessa Beeley, the journalist, the American government, with the help of the CIA, is trying to get the northeast of Syria separated from the country. It's the Kurdish area with oil and fertile land. It was the U.S. and NATO and the CIA and the various German intelligence services that destroyed Yugoslavia. It was the same crowd that overthrew the government of Libya, murdering Muammar Gaddafi. And it was the country with, I won't say the highest standard of living, but the highest quality of life in all of Africa. But he didn't play ball with the Americans. And that's the issue. If you do what the Americans want you to do, you get to stay in office, you get to keep your government, your country is more or less intact and not destroyed. But question what the Americans are doing, don't cooperate with what the Americans want you to do, and you wind up like Yugoslavia and Syria and Iraq, and they're going after Iran now. So it's basically the agencies behind this. They are a government within a government. They have no control. Congress does not really have much of an oversight with them, and the American people don't care because we have these great people who are highly trained and they're protecting us from the evil whatevers. And of course, America needs enemies of one kind or another. And if they don't have them anymore, like the old Soviet Union, they manufacture them. And what they've got now is the name-changing Mujahideen, which became Al Qaeda, which became ISIS or ISIL or whatever you want to call it. It's the terrorist group of the week, but it's the same crowd that we trained and organized and directed.
And it's really interesting to me too. It's one thing to spy during wartime. It's another thing to just have a spy group. It's another thing to assassinate people, to poison children's milk in Cuba. Literally have war. That's far away from a well-regulated militia, I would say. And on top of that, it's obviously inherently unconstitutional because what it's being done is not in plain sight and obviously accountable to nobody. I believe last I checked, the CIA's budget was classified.
Yeah.
And as you were talking about stonewalling earlier, I've heard about your stonewalling with your FOIA request. I've got a lot of stonewalling with my FOIA requests too. And it's sad that you even had to have a FOIA act to be able to do it in the first place.
Yeah.
And you're talking about, the oversight in general for the CIA. Last time I checked, we got really deep was the church committee, and we had some explosive stuff that if people were to even hear nowadays would shock them. So I don't even know what kind of crazy stuff that they're into too. And you served under Reagan and Bush, and Bush was head of the CIA, and I don't believe he was letting that be known before he became president. I'm not sure about that. And if you could maybe just speak to Reagan and Bush as well too, just as an overview. Maybe if you've ever had a chance to speak to them, but I find them interesting characters, and I'd like to get your take because you worked directly under them.
Well, I never had a whole lot of dealings with him directly. It's just tangentially. When Mad Dog Reagan invaded Grenada, because he supposedly expected the Cubans to take over this small island, it was ridiculous. They made a movie out of it with Clint Eastwood, and he was the gung-ho Marine. But by and large, it was Reagan and Bush that invaded Grenada, that invaded Panama, that destroyed the country there, that got the leader of Panama, put him in jail. And he was the guy who essentially did the bidding of the American government and the CIA. And again, he crossed the Americans. He asked questions. And obviously, they made it clear to him, if you say one word about what's going on in here and what we did with you in the past, you're going to be dead. And I think he had a better chance of staying alive if he did, in fact, blow the whistle and say that the Bush family was deeply involved in underhanded dealings in Panama and in other places around the world. But it's too late now. The Americans don't really understand how their government works. They actually think it's a democracy and that there is a two-party form of government. And what we get is basically two cheeks of the great malodorous American behind.
I've never heard that one. I'm going to definitely steal that. That's awesome.
Well, I stole that from an African journalist, and I love it. And you've got no real difference between the two. Yeah, some people may say that, the Republicans favor firearms and the Democrats don't, or they favor business and the Democrats don't. But by and large, you don't see a whole lot of difference in American foreign policy or American domestic policy. We still don't have um, a universal healthcare system like they have everywhere else in the other industrialized countries like Germany, France, Italy, or Britain, or even in Canada. Um, and you've got nobody saying, well, how many bases do we have around the world? I've seen figures that range from 800 to 1,000. Yet the Democrats and the Republicans never seem to want to investigate this. Both so-called parties work very hard at any kind of second party coming out of the woodwork, like Ross Perot tried and like Ralph Nader tried. They simply don't want any competition, and they unite together, and they unite with the what I call the lamestream media to smash any kind of group that dares question the status quo.
Yeah, and that's also has an effect because then people don't want to speak out. But thank you again for being brave enough to speak out. Did you get any sort of intimidation or chicanery happen to you after you said this? Because this is not an inconsequential thing that you did right here. This is not like, okay, and this guy seems like a bad guy, or he might not. These are people that are that are big time people that are dangerous people. So did you ever suffer any type of intimidation or anything like that?
Well, not directly. I mean, nobody held a gun to my head and said, "Sit down and shut up," or "Things are going to go tough for you if you do this." What they did to me essentially was blacklist me. I couldn't get a job to save my soul once the State Department had fired me. Then I went to law school, and then I couldn't get a job once I graduated from law school. And admittedly, the law school didn't really help me much. I thought I could use my own contacts, my own interests, and didn't work. Basically, I stumbled along and ended up at a corrupt Pakistani-run law firm, and then ended up working with a woman who had worked with immigration, and then she gave it up because of family problems, and I simply struck out on my own. And I think I'd rather write than do law. I've got 2 books out. I publish the odd article from time to time, and I get interviews with foreign news sources like Al Mayadeen in Beirut, Lebanon, or I occasionally do various interviews for various Russian television stations. I had been a regular on Press TV in Iran, and to the point where people thought I worked for them. But unfortunately, they've sort of gone silent on me, and I don't get any more interview requests from them.
Well, we're living in a world that's increasingly polarized and increasingly being fed information from their own echo chambers, and it's the vitriol is very high. It's the brainwashing. I mean, I think it's all cult. Like I've been watching a lot about cults. That's always been like a side fascination, and I find out whether it's either religious or Democrat, Republican. These people are literally in a cult in the best way. At least I found in my own experience. Maybe you could speak to this to try to get some of the because you deal with highly esteemed folks. I deal with people that dress like this all the time. I carry whisk in my hand, and unfortunately, the average person is brainwashed to a lot of the stuff, and they're not even thinking about the CIA. They have no idea. I mean, I have no idea, but that's not something that crosses their mind unless they're going to watch Jason Bourne or Brad Pitt or something like that. So I'm just curious to see, and what also is interesting is you're somebody that's pretty well informed on economics, and we have this as a result of what these agencies have been doing, in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, or I'd love to hear your opinion, but you've witnessed the US decline not only in our level of freedom, but also economically, and this is even pre the cooties pandemic. Now we have the Belt and Road Initiative. We have inflation going out of control. Of course, the Federal Reserve. I hate them. What do you see the future of the world, and why are these people doing this? Is it because people like Nixon and Kissinger and Rockefeller wanted to open up China back in the day. Like, what's the goal here?
Well, the goal basically is to stay in power and make sure you do what you want to do to ensure your outcome. I mean, the CIA has gone back at the end of the war. The Nazis had a program called Project Nightingale where they assassinated people. Well, the Americans simply took over the Nightingale organization and used it to disrupt things in the Ukraine where it started, and then tried to use it to disrupt the Soviet Union. In actual fact, they brought a number of these people to the United States, and Allen Dulles fought battles with immigration, saying we need these as for national security, and he eventually brought the Nightingale crowd over here, as he did with the Gehlen organization. That this General Gehlen had been head of intelligence for the Nazi government and the army on the Eastern Front during the war, and he brought them back here, got them trained up, sent them back to Germany, where they became essentially the German Foreign Intelligence Service, the Bundesnachrichtendienst. So by and large, the CIA manages to control other people's governments directly or indirectly. So I think that.
What do you think about the Belt and Road and how that may potentially restructure the future? Like, what does the future look like to you? I mean, it's crazy that I'm even saying this, but not only do we have the Belt and Road, but we have stuff like CRISPR. Now there's a new technology that's coming out that's like a different CRISPR. We have artificial intelligence and Elon Musk putting Neuralinks in our head. The world is rapidly changing. If you could look into your John D. crystal ball, what would you scry?
Well, basically, you don't need a gypsy fortune teller or a crystal ball. All you've got to do is read what's not printed in the Washington Post. The issue is, as Morris Berman wrote in Dark Ages America, the United States is in a downward spiral, and it's not going to be pulled out of it. You can flatten it out, he said, for a while. But by and large, the whole political and economic system in the United States is going to pieces. You could see this years ago with high unemployment, although the government said it wasn't. But I knew all kinds of people who were well educated, well connected, and could not get a full-time paying job to save their souls. You have China, which is now the boogeyman. But the United States built China because the businesses wanted cheap goods to sell and make enormous profits in the process. They would have things moved to China for manufacturing. I mean, you had Walmart that worked with the Chinese that destroyed Rubbermaid. Rubbermaid used to make quality products here in the United States for the kitchen, like drain boards and boxes and packing materials and things like this. And Walmart wanted it cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and they finally couldn't handle it, and they moved everything to China. And where they, I don't know what the average Chinese wage is, but it's a lot less than here in the United States or in Europe. Every time you turn around and look at something, it's made in China, no matter what. So we built the Chinese economy that enabled them to build and modernize their armed forces. And now we say, oh my God, China's an enemy. We have to do something about the Chinese. And, there are a lot of Chinese, and they're not going to let the United States push them around. We're doing the same thing with the Russian Federation. Butt Nugget Bush has created a proxy war using the Ukraine against Russia. They simply want to destroy Russia's culture, political structure, religion, and society, and wonder why the Russians object to this. The Americans told the Russians, well, NATO, we're not going to expand NATO anymore. Clinton did that. And what do we have? We've doubled or tripled the size of the original NATO from the 1940s to now where it's up to the borders of Russia from the Baltic to the Balkans.
And isn't the Cold War over, right? Didn't you literally witness the crumbling of the Berlin Wall, right? I mean,
yeah.
That
I
I
have
mean,
pieces of it
but
at
we
home.
still need NATO, right?
Yeah.
So that's pretty strange that not only is it the reason for NATO not non-existent anymore, according to them,
Mm-hmm.
but also then we're expanding it at the same time, and we're paying the majority of the financing for this. And I thought it might be interesting too. China's looking lustfully at Taiwan, and then now we've had people from the World Economic Forum saying, well, now not NATO, maybe it would be nice if the Europeans had their own military, and we need some type of force. So it's going to be interesting to see what plays out there. I don't know if you wanted to talk about that. I also really want to before we start winding things down, and if you also have a few minutes as well for some commenters here, but I definitely want to talk about your second book and also how people can get it. But Goodbye Europe, Hello Chaos. I think this is a really fascinating book here, and it's something that people need to understand. I'll just leave you with that, and if you could tell people about the book and how to get it.
Yeah. Well, both books are available from Amazon. The first book, Visas for Al Qaeda, is available in English and German. The German title is Die CIA und der Terror. And the second book, Goodbye Europe, Hello Chaos, Merkel's Migrant Bomb, has been translated into Spanish and into German with the title Überrollt. And the book has been denounced as racist, and all it does is show how the American failed foreign policy has created such a terrible situation in Europe. It was written, I guess, 5 years ago now. But Goodbye Europe basically is based on fact. I was looking through it just the other day, and it talks about what the United States had done in the Middle East. You had destruction of countries in the area. They were carefully guided, herded into Europe. It was based on a book written by Kelly Greenhill called Weapons of Mass Migration. And what she did was essentially it was a template or a cookbook for how to destroy countries. You move the people out of your own country, send the doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs or the equivalent out of the country, which weakens the banking system, the economy of all kinds, manufacturing, you name it. The people there aren't in the country anymore to run the banks, to run the sewage treatment plants, and so on. They've been driven out because their countries have been destroyed, their economy has been destroyed, and they're moved into Europe. And of course, you have the situation, as Kelly Greenhill said, where you destroy the original country, and then when these people come into the new host country, you have this fight not only between the incoming people and the inhabitants, but between the inhabitants themselves, those who welcome the foreigners, and those who say, wait a minute, we get to decide on who comes into our country. It's our country. And you have these battles, and they're carefully arranged.
Yeah, has nothing to do with race whatsoever. They've done it across the globe, and it really is divide and conquer against two people and get them to have a problem. I mean, even the CIA coined the term blowback. And, George Washington and our founders warned against foreign entanglements. And we go over there like it's nothing, and we'll drone strike a funeral, we'll devastate somebody's wedding. And you wonder why people hate us. But then on top of that, they're giving J. Michael Springman, they're saying, hey, these guys that were just shot at with drones, give these guys give them visas. That's what's going on, guys. That's what's going on with your tax money. And we don't even know. The CIA's budget is not even classified, right? We know that $9.9 billion annually is on the NYPD. They don't know the Constitution. Police solve 2% of major crimes, right? They even before all this stuff, these people, do you think the Democrats or Republicans, they care? Like Mike was saying earlier, these people, you might be different on abortion, but they're still authorizing the NDAA, and they're still, the Patriot Act, the war on terror is over, just like the Cold War is over. Can we maybe end the Patriot Act? No, they still vote on what's important. They still agree, whether it's Biden or Trump. You got to roll up your sleeve and get the cootie shot. You know what I'm saying? There's certain things that these guys are going to agree on, whether you agree personally or not. But it's just interesting to see what those people agree on. I would always implore people to keep an open but skeptical mind on all things. And I just put in the chat, guys. I'm going to put it in the chat again here. The link to purchase his book. Also, it's in the description. It's the top link in the description of this video. So go there and share this as well. Share this video with people. So one of the final questions I wanted to ask you, I have a couple questions here from the chat.
Mm-hmm.
In your estimation, in your research, who do you think runs things? Because the subtitle of your book is Angela Merkel. She's also a member of the World Economic Forum, the Bilderberg Group. And then also you talking about Dulles, CIA, the Council on Foreign Relations there. There's a lot of overlap going on. Like, who are the people really pulling the strings in your estimation?
Well, yeah, George Soros and his Open Society. One of the people from his Open Society, an Austrian, had a think tank. He supported this wave of migration hitting Europe. You had a guy from the United Nations at one point on migration. He had been Attorney General for Ireland, and he thought that Europe wasn't diverse enough. He seemed to think that Germans and Italians and French were apparently all very similar. He wanted to bring in a new wave of people from elsewhere in the world and make Europe more diverse. And of course, you've got the people who think, well, just like here, bring in a load of foreigners, make them work cheap. They'll pay into the tax system. They'll keep money going into the social welfare organization. And they don't seem to think, though, that, wait a minute, what happens when these people age out? Are we going to bring in another wave of migrants? And they don't look at the cost. You have people coming in that have no ties whatsoever to Europe. They don't speak the language. They don't have any kind of common culture. They've got to be taught French, German, whatever. They've got to be given skills and training because by and large, they don't have any. You have some doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs who've done quite well for themselves. In the book, I talk about a Syrian who was an eye doctor who went to Germany, was doing quite well for himself. But for everybody like him, you've got somebody else who's working, sweeping the streets, hauling garbage and stuff like that. So you don't have any philosopher kings in general migrating to Europe.
We got a question here from Rogier Hop in the Netherlands. What does Mr. Springman think of the Netherlands? We've got our friends, the royal family, and my favorite Mark Rutte over here. Shout outs to Mark Rutte.
Yeah, well, Mark Rutte is one of the people who worked with Merkel to bring the migrant wave into Europe. And he rounded on this other guy, Geert Wilders, who again raised questions about, well, what are we doing with all these migrants? Let's look at what's happening here. And he won a goodly number of votes, but he was castigated by Rutte and the rest of the establishment for daring to question the weapons of mass migration.
Yeah, I mean, to me, and who am I? I'm just a dude. I'm no expert on anything. But to me, it just looks like they're lowering everybody to second and third class citizens. And the new future that we're going to have, it's not going to be nothing. I mean, it's not a free market right now, but it's going to be nothing resembling a free market with the smart cities and what's that Neom over there. It's going to be a weird, interesting future. It's probably maybe like a Ready Player One type of thing. It's weird, but it's going to be interesting to see what the future holds. What's your favorite album of all time?
Music album?
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I don't think I have one really.
Oh, okay, come on, man. You gotta like somebody. Who are some of your favorite people that you listen to, man? I know you look like a Wu-Tang guy to me.
No, I listen to classical music, Beethoven and Bach and folks like that. See, I think if the composer hasn't been dead for 100 years, I don't want to hear anything he's composed.
That's fair. I don't know anything about classical music, but I I can tell when someone's playing Beethoven, and I like the fact that Beethoven was a little more hardcore for his time. He was a little more dark, and he was a little more fancy too. He was like to show off a little bit too, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I definitely like Beethoven. I don't know about the rest of them, but Beethoven's awesome. Wu-Tang Clan is for the children for sure. Have you ever done anything crazy with your diplomatic immunity? Like I would have probably punched a hooker in a coked up rage. I mean, what have you done anything awesome? Have
No,
you
never did. And in fact, what I really should have done and didn't do when I was in Germany and the Berlin Wall came down, I was told not to use my tourist passport to go to what was then Eastern Germany, even though I had a contact who could get me in with some of the marchers. And I tried to get a visa through the American embassy, and they simply shut me down. I think because the CIA wanted control of the situation, and they didn't want any outsiders nosing around trying to look at what was happening.
Yeah, the CIA is always up to a bunch of shady stuff. Let's put on screen one more time how people can get your books here. And also, I was looking up your social medias, man. I sent you, I don't know if the social medias that you have are your social medias. When you Google your name, it comes up with the profile for your Twitter and your Facebook. Are those the correct links? It seems like, I'm not sure if those are the correct links or not.
Well, the Twitter is at Mike Springman with 2 N's, and
Okay.
Facebook is my name, J. Michael Springman.
Just out of curiosity, what's your profile picture over there?
For Facebook, it's a picture of a pirate cat.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure. Okay, here we got your Twitter. Okay, cool. All right, so I will put the links to his Twitter and his books, but please check out Mr. Springman's books. And guys, please share this video because it's not something. We've interviewed Karen Stewart, we've interviewed John Kiriakou, a lot of different whistleblowers on the channel, and one of the things that you see is large corporations aren't willing to get, people are paying them for speaking tours and giving them whole bunches of money because they spoke out about the government. It's not a very lucrative thing to do, but it's a very brave and courageous thing to do. So please support Michael. Find the links in the description. And also, if you can't do anything else, at least share this video, share with your friends and family, and say, hey, what do you think about this? Keep an open but skeptical mind. Remain nonviolent. J. Michael Springman, thank you so much for taking the time to do this and just what you did for changing the course of history. God bless you, evolution and Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard. I am the reincarnation of L. Ron Hubbard. And when I get the mansions, you're coming to party too. It's a vegan taco party. Guys,